One Stateline student won $500 Wednesday after writing an essay dedicated to the 16th president who served in Illinois. You might know him, Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, I think I've heard of him.
Yeah.
The winner is Devia Carney from Keith Country Day School. The essay centers on how the former president would handle many challenges and issues. Carney says it's important to learn history and the importance of the subject.
As adults, we're going to be the people who have to make these decisions. So, getting our feet wet while we don't have as much responsibility is a good way for us to practice when these things really matter for us to do.